It was early October when I decided to take a solo trip into the Ozarks. I'd been itching to get away from people for a while, to be surrounded by nothing but trees and air and silence. I took a week off work, packed my gear, and drove down through the winding roads that cut through northern Arkansas until I found a trailhead that looked about right. Not many cars in the lot. Fewer people meant less noise. Just what I wanted. The hike in was about 6 miles before I turned off onto a side trail that was even less used. I'd found the spot on an old hiking forum. Someone had mentioned a flat area above a small creek that was good for backcountry camping. No amenities, no one else around. I made it there by mid-afternoon, set up my tent beneath a cluster of shortleaf pines, and got a small fire going. There were plenty of dry sticks and leaves. The sky was clear, and the air smelled like warm dirt and pine sap. It was perfect. That first night, I cooked some rice and beans on my little camp stove and sat watching the sun fade behind the hills. The woods turned blue and gray, and the shadows got longer. Crickets started up, and somewhere out in the trees, I heard a couple of barred owls calling back and forth. It was quiet in that thick, calming way you only get in deep woods. I was sitting in my camp chair with a book, just letting time slip by. I turned in early, belly full, mind quiet. It was just after I zipped up my sleeping bag that I heard it. A high-pitched whistle. Short, maybe 2 seconds long. Not like a person whistling a tune, more like a signal. It came from somewhere in the trees off to my right, maybe 50 yards or so. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything else almost too clean, too sharp. At first, I didn't think much of it. Birds make weird sounds, especially in the fall when they're migrating. Could have been some kind of nightjar, maybe even an insect. I lay there listening, half curious, half drifting into sleep. Then, after a few minutes, it came again. Same length, same tone, same direction. Kept going like that for maybe an hour. Always the same, every few minutes, just one clean whistle. I thought it was strange, but I'd been out enough to know that strange doesn't mean dangerous. Nature's full of weird noises. I told myself it was nothing, rolled over, and eventually fell asleep. The second night, it started again, just after sundown. I was finishing up some jerky and trail mix for dinner, and the moment the light started to fade, there it was, that same whistle, same direction, same short bursts every few minutes. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. It was too regular. It didn't skip a beat, like a bird calling at random intervals. Felt timed. It didn't come from the same exact spot each time, but it didn't wander much either. Maybe it shifted 10 feet one way or the other, but always in the same general area. I sat by the fire for a while, listening to it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a person hunting, using a whistle to signal someone else. Maybe it was some kind of primitive bird call. Could have been anything. Still, it crawled under my skin in a way that real natural sounds don't. I went to bed with my headlamp on and the tent zipper pulled tight. I slept lighter than the first night. Every time I dozed off, the whistle pulled me back. Eventually, around midnight, it stopped. I lay there for a while longer, eyes open, trying to listen for footsteps or movement. Nothing came. I must have drifted off around 1 or 2. Third night, I was more on edge. I spent the day hiking along the creek, trying to distract myself. Collected some kindling, refilled my water bottles, and sat on a rock ledge watching the birds move through the trees. It was a peaceful day, bright and warm like early fall should be. But in the back of my head, I kept thinking about that whistle. When I got back to camp, I decided I wasn't going to let it get to me. I figured if it was someone messing around, another camper maybe, I'd whistle back, just once. Maybe let them know they weren't the only one out there. The sun dropped again, the shadows stretched out, and sure enough, the whistle started up. First time I heard it, I just sat still listening. Waited for the second, then the third. Then I took a breath and whistled back. Same tone, same length. Just once. Silence. I waited, holding my breath without realizing it. 5 minutes went by, then 10. No sound at all. No crickets, no birds, no rustle of leaves. Just the wind and the creak of trees shifting. Then, from farther up the hill, I heard a branch snap. Not a twig, a full step. Slow and deliberate. Then another. And then again the whistle. But this time it was closer, much closer, and it was wrong. It sounded almost like the same whistle, but off, like someone trying to copy it. Too forced. There was no natural rhythm to it anymore. No consistency. It didn't sound like a bird, not even a person really. It sounded like someone trying not to be noticed, like someone trying to mimic a sound they thought should belong out there. I stood up, heart in my throat. My fire had burned down to embers, and I didn't feel like crouching down to stoke it. I didn't feel like doing anything but getting out of there. I didn't pack up. I didn't roll up my sleeping bag or take down the tent. I grabbed my flashlight, my pack with a half-full water bladder, and I walked. Didn't even bother with the trail at first. I just moved away from that whistle, using my light to scan ahead. My legs were stiff and heavy from sitting, and every crunch of leaves underfoot sounded like thunder in that still forest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something just past the trees. I never did, but I could hear it. That whistle kept coming. Short, sharp, getting quieter, then closer again. It was moving, pacing me almost. I didn't run, but I walked fast. My ankles rolled over roots and uneven rocks, but I didn't stop. I just kept going, scanning for the main trail. I knew I'd eventually hit it if I kept heading west and downhill. After maybe a mile or two of off-trail bushwhacking, I found the path. It was barely more than a deer trail, but I recognized a few cairns someone had stacked, and I knew I was on the right route back to the trailhead. I didn't stop walking. The moon was up by then, maybe half full, so I kept my light off unless I had to look at something up close. The trees were thinner on the ridges, so I moved quicker there. In the valleys, where the brush thickened and the leaves piled up, I slowed down a bit. I don't know how long I walked exactly, maybe 3 hours. The whole time, I kept listening behind me, and every so often, I'd hear it. That damn whistle. Not as often now. Maybe every 15 or 20 minutes. Always a little farther back, like whoever or whatever it was had given up following too close. But it didn't stop completely, and that's what really got to me. It wasn't hunting me. It wasn't chasing me. It was just staying there, letting me know it was still around. Around 4 in the morning, I saw the first sign for the trailhead, a little green placard on a tree. I walked faster then, legs aching, feet swollen, clothes damp with sweat even though the night had gotten cold. I made it to the trailhead by first light, just as the sky was starting to glow pale gray behind the hills. I didn't even go to my car right away. I sat on the edge of the lot, facing the trail, listening. Nothing. The sun came up, the birds started moving again, and the world went back to normal. But I didn't feel normal. I sat there until the sun was full up, then walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat inside with the doors locked for a good 10 minutes, just breathing. I left everything behind. My tent, my gear, even the damn book I was reading. Drove into the nearest town, got a motel room, and slept for 14 hours straight. The next day, I told myself I'd go back, hike in during daylight, and grab my stuff. I didn't. I never went back. I think about it more than I should. That whistle, the way it mimicked something natural but wasn't. The way it moved, always just far enough to make me doubt if it was real. I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was some backwoods hunter messing with me. Maybe someone living out there, someone who didn't want company. Could have been anything. All I know is the moment I whistled back, everything changed. That was a mistake. That sound still comes back to me sometimes when I'm lying in bed. I'll hear it, clear as day, and sit up straight, heart pounding. But it's not real. Not here. Still, I don't go camping alone anymore. Not in the Ozarks. Not anywhere. I hadn't planned on camping alone, not really. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip to a quiet, secluded spot I'd found after a little digging online. A perfect place to clear my head, maybe do some fishing, and just get away from the usual noise of city life. When I pulled up to the campsite, a little pull-off spot tucked deep in the woods, I felt the familiar mix of excitement and trepidation that comes with the solitude of camping. The forest was thick around me, the kind of thick where it felt like the trees themselves were holding secrets, but I didn't think much of it. The kind of place you read about in those old camping journals, full of nature sounds and quiet serenity. Setting up camp went smoothly. I had my tent ready, my camp stove set up, and a few small luxuries with me. A good book, some extra snacks, and a thermos of coffee to get me through the night. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees as I finished setting up, and I was already feeling that peaceful calm I'd hoped for. As the sky darkened, I decided to light a small fire. Even though I knew the forest was dry and the risk of fire was high, I didn't want to take chances, so I kept the fire small, just enough to keep me warm and cook a bit of food. The crackling of the wood was the only sound. A few hissing pops as the flames danced in the fire pit. That's when I first heard it. Something off in the distance, barely audible over the fire. A rustling sound, like something moving through the brush. It wasn't the wind. I'd been in enough forests to know the difference between the noise the wind makes and the soft shuffle of feet through leaves and underbrush. It wasn't a deer either. The sound was too deliberate, too heavy. I stood up, trying to peer into the darkening forest, but I couldn't see much. The trees around me were thick, and the fading light didn't help. I shrugged it off. It was probably a deer or a raccoon, something harmless. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, grabbed my fishing rod, and walked down to the small stream I'd scouted earlier. The water was cold, rushing over smooth rocks, and the peace of it helped ease my nerves. I didn't want to go back to the tent yet. I needed to be out in the open, away from whatever I thought I heard. I fished for an hour or so, trying to catch something for dinner, but didn't have much luck. It didn't matter, though. It was about the process, the quiet time. The only thing that seemed to matter was the feeling of being out there alone, the sense of isolation. I packed up my gear around 9:30 p.m. The forest had gone still, so still that it almost felt unnatural. The sounds of the forest had faded. No birds, no rustling leaves, not even a wind blowing through the trees. It was the kind of silence that makes you uncomfortable, but I told myself it was just part of the night. When I returned to my camp, something felt off. The air had changed, colder somehow. I noticed immediately that the fire had almost gone out, which was strange since I hadn't left it that long. I grabbed the logs nearby and tossed them on the fire, watching as the flames licked up at the new wood. Then I heard it again, louder this time, a soft thud. I froze, my eyes scanning the edge of the tree line, but I couldn't see anything. The noise had come from the direction of the trees, but it wasn't quite the same. It sounded heavier, like something had stepped on a branch, but it wasn't a deer. Whatever it was too deliberate, too controlled. I sat still, staring into the fire. I could hear my heart beating in my ears now, a slow, heavy pulse that matched the rhythm of the darkened forest. I considered grabbing my gear and heading back to my truck, but then the thought came, what if it was just a bear or a fox? I didn't want to overreact, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I kept my head low, focusing on the fire. For a few minutes, everything felt like it would be fine, like I could just sit here, warm by the fire, and let whatever it was go about its business. But then there was a sound from behind me, something closer. Not a thud this time, but a crack. I turned my head toward the sound instinctively, but all I could see were the tall, dark trees. I couldn't explain why, but I was starting to feel like there was someone, or something, watching me from the shadows. It was a feeling I hadn't felt since I was a kid, camping with my dad and hearing that strange, unmistakable rustle in the bushes. The kind of thing you can't explain away. The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the leaves above me. I had an odd thought that maybe I'd missed something, like a storm was coming, but I didn't hear any thunder or see any lightning. Still, the wind was picking up faster than usual, and I could feel it in my bones. I stood up abruptly, thinking maybe I should check the perimeter of the campsite, but I hesitated for a moment, considering how ridiculous it all sounded. It was probably nothing. I was just a little jumpy. Then I heard it again, a footstep. A clear, deliberate footstep in the underbrush, followed by another, this time much closer. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the wind or some small animal. This was something large, I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, my breath caught in my chest. I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could think of was to keep the fire going, to make sure the light didn't fade completely. I bent down, quickly grabbing a few more logs and throwing them onto the fire. The flames shot up and I felt a little safer, but not much. The sound had stopped, but the feeling hadn't. It was there, thick and suffocating, pressing in from all sides. I glanced over at the truck. It was about 100 yards away, but it felt like miles. I realized I didn't want to walk out there in the dark. If I tried, I'd be alone in the woods with something or someone just a few steps behind me. Instead, I reached into my pack and pulled out my knife, holding it in my hand, trying to steady my shaking fingers. I kept my eyes trained on the trees, but everything was just too dark. My mind started to race with all the possibilities. Was it a person out there? Or was it an animal? A bear, maybe? I stood there for what felt like hours, staring into the darkness, not moving, not making a sound. But there was something just beyond the firelight. Couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Every instinct in my body was telling me to run, to get out of there as fast as I could. But I stayed. I had no real reason why, but I didn't want to seem like I was scared, even though I was. Eventually, the sounds stopped. The rustling, the footsteps, the feeling of being watched. All of it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed by the fire, listening to every creak of the trees, every rustle in the bushes. And when the sun finally came up, I packed my gear and left, not looking back. It felt like I'd narrowly escaped something, though I couldn't say what. I never went back to that campsite, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was had been waiting for me to leave. The woods didn't feel the same anymore, and I don't think I'll ever understand what happened that night. The truck was still there when I left, the sunlight streaming over it like nothing ever happened. But I knew something had, and I wouldn't forget it anytime soon. We were 4 of us out there. Me, Jason, Kyle, and Drew. It was late September, the kind of cold where your breath hangs in the air even during the day, and at night it just bites into your skin. We drove up from Boise and kept going until the road turned to gravel, then dirt, and finally into barely anything at all. We parked where the trees opened up into a clearing, a spot Jason swore he remembered from a hunting trip a couple years back. No other cars, no sign of recent camps, nothing but trees, sky, and us. We set up 2 tents near a ring of blackened rocks where someone had once made a fire. The ground was uneven and cold, covered in pine needles and roots that pressed into your back even through a sleeping pad. Still, it felt like a good place. Remote, quiet. The kind of quiet you only get when you're too far for anyone else to bother you. There was no cell service. None of us minded. That was kind of the point. Get away from everything. No noise, no work, no people. Just us and the woods. We spent most of the day gathering deadwood, drinking beer, and making dumb jokes. The fire started up easy with how dry the wood was. It cracked and popped while we roasted sausages and ate from cans. I remember looking up and thinking how I hadn't seen stars that bright in a long time. No light pollution, just layers and layers of stars stretching across the black sky like someone had spilled glitter across a tarp. Around 10, it started to get real cold, so we threw on extra layers and huddled closer to the fire. Jason pulled out a little bottle of bourbon he'd brought, and we passed it around, talking about old camping trips, girls, jobs. Nothing serious. Nobody brought a guitar. No ghost stories, just 4 guys enjoying the peace and quiet. It was close to midnight when Kyle noticed them. He was standing off to the side, peeing into the woods, when he suddenly froze and looked back at us. No words, just this tight look on his face. He motioned with his hand, a kind of low wave, and we all went quiet. About 100 feet out between the tree trunks, there were little lights, tiny pinpricks, maybe 10 or 12 of them, spaced out unevenly but all at the same height. At first I thought they were stars showing through the trees, but they were too low. Then I thought maybe animal eyes catching the firelight, but they didn't move right. They swayed, slow, side to side, like someone holding a flashlight loosely in their hand, letting it bob while they walked. but nobody was walking. The lights weren't getting closer, just swaying. Jason killed the fire almost immediately. He kicked dirt and pine needles onto the coals until the light vanished and the clearing went pitch dark. We stood there for a minute trying to let our eyes adjust. The temperature seemed to drop fast without the fire, or maybe that was just nerves. The lights were still there, small and pale, like old flashlights running low on battery. Then one of them just blinked out. Not all at once, just one. A few seconds later, another started moving, slow, like it was gliding through the trees toward us. Not in a straight line either. It moved left, then right, like it was tracing a pattern. That was enough for us. We didn't talk, didn't plan. We just sat down, still and quiet, backs to the cold ground, barely breathing. We listened. There were footsteps, not twigs snapping, not rustling, just the sound of soft, deliberate movement. Crunch, pause, crunch. It wasn't constant. Whoever or whatever it was moved slow and careful, circling. I could tell it was moving clockwise, wide around the edge of our camp. Then another set of steps started from the opposite direction. Same slow pace, same careful rhythm. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. Every little sound felt huge. The wind through the trees, a pine needle brushing my jacket. I tried not to move, but my hands were shaking. We stayed like that for maybe 30 minutes. Could have been longer. Time stretched. I didn't check my watch. Didn't want to risk the light. At some point, the sound stopped. No more footsteps. No more lights. Just darkness and cold. Still, we didn't move. I think we were too scared to believe it was over. Eventually, I felt Drew shift next to me. He turned slowly, then whispered, too quiet for words, and pointed toward the truck. We had parked maybe 40 yards from the tents, near a line of trees. We hadn't locked it. Nothing felt heavier than standing up and moving in that moment. Every step felt like it echoed through the woods. I expected something to come rushing out of the trees, but nothing happened. We got to the truck, started it without turning on the headlights. Jason had one of those dim red lights he used for hunting. He clicked it on so we could grab our gear fast. Not everything, just what we needed. We left the tents, the food, half our stuff. Didn't care. We drove out of there with the headlights off for maybe a quarter mile until we were sure we were alone. Then we turned them on and didn't stop until we hit pavement again. Pulled into a gas station maybe an hour and a half later. None of us said anything until the sun came up. We never figured out what it was. There were no signs of people nearby. No vehicles parked on the old forest roads. No one followed us. We thought about calling the sheriff's office, reporting strange people in the woods. But what would we even say? That we saw lights? That someone was walking around our camp? No crime. Nothing stolen. No one hurt. Just a group of guys too scared to sleep. I've been in the woods most of my life. I hunt. I hike. I camp. I've run into animals. I've heard weird sounds. But this wasn't like that. This wasn't an animal. And it wasn't just some kids messing around either. Not that far out. Not in that kind of cold. Not in the middle of nowhere with no sign of campfires, trash, or even tracks. Whoever it was came in quiet and left even quieter. I haven't been back to that spot. Haven't even tried to look for it on a map. Part of me wants to believe it was just my imagination. But we all saw it. All four of us. Same lights. Same movement. Same fear. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about how close those footsteps got. How they circled. How they stopped. What if we hadn't put out the fire? What if we'd called out? What if we'd stayed the night? I don't want to know. I've camped since then, but I stick to state parks now. Places with people. Places with phone signal. Places where, if you see a light in the woods, it's probably just another camper. Probably. And I always lock my truck. My brother and I had planned the trip for months. We'd been backpacking together for years, mostly up in the Smokies or along bits of the Appalachian Trail when we could get the time off work. This time, we picked a less traveled section of trail in eastern Tennessee. It wasn't part of any national park, just state land and Forest Service roads winding through thick woods and low ridges. We didn't care much about the views, just wanted the quiet, to walk and talk like we always did, sleep under the stars and wake up with the sun. We parked my old truck at a dead-end gravel road that faded into tall grass and a busted fence. From there, it was all on foot. No cell service, no noise, no people. The trail followed a dry old forest road for a while before dipping into a long stretch of hardwoods that paralleled a shallow creek. We'd planned to hike in around 10 miles, camp for the night near the water, then loop back the next day along a ridge. That first day was warm for late fall. The leaves were nearly gone, scattered across the ground like red and gold paper. The sky stayed overcast, dull gray with the sun pushing through in patches. We hiked mostly in silence, stopping now and then to snack or check the map. We crossed the creek 4 times on our way in, just ankle-deep water cutting through the woods. It had that cold, clear look to it that told me it came from somewhere high up. By late afternoon, we found a spot to camp. It wasn't much, just a flat spot a little above the waterline with enough open ground for our tent. The trees were spaced wide apart there, maybe the remains of an old logging area. We could see the creek 20 feet away, bending off into the trees to our left. The nearest trail marker was about a mile back, and we hadn't seen a soul since we left the truck. We set up camp like we always did. Tent went up easy, a little 2-person dome we'd used a dozen times. We stacked firewood, filtered some water from the creek, and cooked dinner before it got dark. Just freeze-dried beef stew and some instant coffee, enough to take the edge off the chill that rolled in when the sun went down. By the time it was fully dark, the temperature had dropped into the low 40s. We had layers and good bags, so it didn't bother us much. We sat around the fire for a while, talking about work, the dumb stuff we did as kids, whatever came to mind. Eventually, we killed the fire, zipped up the tent, and climbed into our bags. I don't know what time I woke up, but it was deep into the night, the kind of dark that makes you feel like the world stops beyond a few feet. At first, I thought maybe I just needed to pee. Happens sometimes when you're camping and drink too much coffee. But after I lay there a few minutes, eyes open, I heard something. It was faint at first, but not something I could ignore. Not wind through the trees, not a raccoon rooting through leaves, not a coyote. It sounded like crying, real crying, a human voice, soft and broken. It came from downstream, maybe 100 yards off, and echoed faintly through the woods. I froze in my bag, listening. It didn't rise or fall like animal calls. It was steady, desperate sobbing, like someone who'd been crying a long time and couldn't stop. I sat up, my heart already pounding. I looked over at my brother. He was awake too. He hadn't said a word, just slowly unzipped his bag and sat up next to me. The tent was pitch black. We could just barely make out each other's shapes. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We've done enough backcountry hiking to know how to listen, how to stay quiet when something doesn't feel right. The crying kept on, low and miserable, almost too steady. Not frantic, not yelling, just sobbing like someone who'd lost everything. I fumbled for my headlamp but didn't turn it on. Instead, I reached for the knife I kept in my boot next to my bag and held it close. My brother had his knife too, already in his lap. We both sat there in the dark, listening. Then it stopped. Not faded away, just stopped. Like someone had taken a breath mid-sob and vanished. The silence that followed was heavier than the crying. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. No owls, no wind, nothing. Just that heavy stillness that makes the back of your neck tighten. We stayed like that for I don't know how long. Minutes, probably. Then, without a word, we both started packing. We didn't light anything, didn't start a fire, didn't even speak. We packed up by feel. Sleeping bags, stove, everything we could fit back into our packs without making noise. We left the tent, didn't even bother breaking it down. I slung my headlamp around my neck but still didn't turn it on. We just moved. It was maybe 2:30 or 3 in the morning when we started hiking out. We didn't follow the trail exactly, not at first. We just headed upstream, keeping the water on our left so we wouldn't get turned around. Eventually, we found the old trail again and stuck to it. The moonlight came through the trees just enough to see the shape of the path. The forest didn't make a sound the whole way out. No animals, no birds, not even the usual creaks of trees settling. I kept looking behind us every few minutes, half expecting to see something, anything, but there was nothing. Just empty woods and the sound of our boots crunching on leaves. We didn't stop until the sky started to lighten. Somewhere along the way, the birds finally started calling again. A woodpecker, some distant songbirds. It felt like whatever had been holding the world still finally let go. When we reached the truck, we threw our packs in the bed, climbed in, and sat there for a few minutes before either of us spoke. The sun hadn't even cleared the ridgeline yet. Everything was covered in a thin frost. We didn't talk much on the drive home, just rode in silence, each of us stuck in our own head, trying to make sense of it. It's been a few years now, and we still don't know what that was. I've thought about it 100 times, tried to rationalize it. Could have been a lost hiker, sure, but that's not what it felt like. I've heard people in trouble before. This wasn't that. It didn't sound like someone trying to be found. It sounded like someone, or something, trying to be heard. I've gone camping since then, dozens of times, but I haven't been back to that stretch of trail. My brother hasn't either. We don't talk about it much. When we do, it's always the same few words. You remember that night? And then silence. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that. Never have. But I do believe some places hold things in them. Memories, pain, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes that stuff leaks out. And if you're there at the wrong time, in the wrong moment, you hear it. That place by the creek? It's one of those places. I don't need to know what happened there. I don't want to. All I know is we were lucky to walk away, and I've never once been tempted to go back. It was the second night of a solo trip deep in the Allegheny National Forest. I've been planning it for weeks. I wanted solitude, real solitude, the kind that forces you to hear every creak of the trees and question every rustle in the underbrush. That part of Pennsylvania is thick with forest, miles from anything resembling civilization once you're deep enough in. And that's where I was, tucked away in a quiet patch off an unmarked trail I'd followed along a ridgeline for most of the afternoon. I hadn't seen another person since I left my car 2 days before. Not a single footprint, no wrappers or broken branches, no sign that anyone else had come through. That was the whole point. I was used to being out in the woods, hiking, camping, paddling. I'd been in grizzly country, been followed by coyotes, and even stalked once by a cougar in the Rockies. But there was something different about these woods. It was the stillness, almost too still. That second night, I had my hammock strung between 2 tall pines, just back from a narrow creek that flowed cold and fast over smooth stones. My tarp was pitched low in case of rain. I'd eaten a small dinner, instant rice, some jerky, and a chocolate bar, and had a little fire going just big enough to keep me warm and light up the small clearing. It was almost fully dark. No moon that night, just layers of clouds and the kind of blackness that makes your breath feel loud. The fire was crackling and popping, just enough light to see the edge of the tree line. Beyond that was nothing, just pitch black forest. I was sitting on a log I'd rolled close to the fire, slowly sipping some tea from my metal cup when I heard it, twigs snapping. Not the random crunch of a squirrel or a deer picking through the brush. These were regular, spaced out, crunch, pause, crunch, pause, like footsteps, human footsteps, but I couldn't see anything. I stood up slowly, quietly setting my cup down on the ground beside me. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows through the trees, but it didn't reach far enough to see the source. The sound came from behind me, off to the right 30, maybe 40 feet out. It wasn't rushing or stumbling. It was deliberate. Someone or something was walking toward my camp, slow and steady, but no flashlight, no voice, no gear sounds, just steps. I squatted down low behind the log and reached into my pack, pulling out the knife I always keep on top. I held it tight in my fist. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep my breath quiet. I could still hear the steps, closer now, maybe 20 feet. I strained to see through the dark, but nothing moved that I could make out. Then the steps stopped, just stopped. No crunch, no shuffling, just nothing. I waited, frozen in place, eyes darting side to side, ears trying to separate the sounds of wind from something moving. But there was only silence, a heavy kind of silence that pressed down on everything. I stayed crouched behind that log for what felt like forever. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. I didn't move. Every once in a while I thought I heard something, like a soft shift in the leaves or a sigh in the trees, but I couldn't be sure. Then, quietly, carefully, the steps started again. But this time they were moving away. Same pace, same rhythm, just retreating step by step back into the woods. Eventually, I couldn't hear anything anymore, just the wind and the gurgle of the creek. I let the fire die down and didn't move. I didn't dare get in the hammock. I didn't sleep. I sat there on that log with my knife in my hand, watching and listening for the rest of the night. My eyes burned, my legs cramped, but I wasn't going to let myself drift off. Not out here, not after that. When dawn finally came, the forest looked normal again. Birds chirping, light catching the mist hanging low along the creek. I stood up and stretched, legs stiff, back sore. I checked around camp. My gear was untouched. Nothing had been moved, nothing disturbed. I started walking a slow circle around the clearing, looking at the ground. That's when I saw it. A single boot print in the damp dirt, just off the trail I'd used to come in. It wasn't mine. I checked. The tread was different. Vida deepa. Heavier. I wear trail runners, lightweight, soft-soled. This was a boot print. Deep heel. Defined edges. Someone had been there. Someone had stood just outside my camp in the dark, watching. They never said a word. Never showed a light. Never made any move to announce themselves. I packed up fast. Didn't even make coffee. I didn't care about breakfast. I just needed to get out. But I didn't take the trail back the way I came. Something about going that direction, toward whoever had been out there, made my skin crawl. I took the longer loop instead, bushwhacking west until I found a Forest Service road I remembered seeing on the map. It added miles, but I didn't care. I moved fast, barely stopping, just sucking down water and pushing forward. That whole day, I kept checking behind me. Every turn, every bend in the trail. I stopped a few times just to listen. I didn't hear anything else, but the feeling didn't leave. It was like something had cracked open in the woods that night, like I wasn't supposed to be there, and someone had come to remind me of that. By late afternoon, I reached the road, gravel and ruts, but I didn't stop walking until I saw my car. I threw my pack in the back seat and locked the doors as soon as I sat down. My hands were shaking. I sat there for a long while before I started the engine. I didn't report it. Who would I tell? No crime had happened. No face to describe. Just footsteps in the dark and a boot print in the dirt. But I haven't gone back there since. And I haven't solo camped that deep in the woods again. I still camp, still hike, still love the forest. But now I think harder about where I go, how far I push in, who might be out there with me, because that night something changed. Not in the world, in me. The silence used to be comforting. Now, sometimes it sounds like someone holding their breath, watching, waiting, and I listen harder now, not for animals or weather or trees swaying in the wind, but for the soft, steady snap of twigs, the kind that only come in steps, human steps,